Good evening. We're starting off tonight with a classic story, of its kind ever written. You will find it in every representative library, translated to English. These be ancient stories, from a time in history when people didn't travel much. There was no formal schooling other than religious institutions, such as the Catholic institution. These stories reached the ears of the English public hundreds and hundreds of years before the likes of Charles Darwin had formulated or constructed any contradictory thinking. Thusly, it should be known that at the height of popularity of these stories in Europe, Arabia, and England, the people of England and the wider world at hand, in them days of old, would seriously consider these stories as factual, much more than the population would today. Many hundreds of years ago, when these stories were common in households, it was pervalis documentus, for even so, being at this time the world was little well known, great lands and civilizations were flourishing, and had not as yet been discovered, so as to pertain that at the time both the Catholic Institute and prominent English notables deeply considered both the world to be flat as a dish one would eat soup and bread off, and they also considered and decreed, as did the Catholic Institute at the time, that these stories were none other than documented accounts of real seafaring travellers. Tonight's story is The First Voyage of Sinbad the Sailor, presented to you by Conspiracy Club and the official partner with Kevin Trudeau Fan Club. Like, subscribe, and look out in the description for the links to the fascinating novel Gin City, also about travelling and voyages and adventure galore. Like, subscribe, share, free to comment. Now we begin. The First Voyage of Sinbad the Sailor. There lived in the city of Baghdad, during the reign of Commander of the Faithful, Harun al-Rashid, a man named Sinbad the Hamel, one in poor case who bore burdens on his head for hire. It happened to him one day of the great heat, that whilst he was carrying a heavy load, he became exceedingly weary and sweated profusely, the heat and weight alike oppressing him. Presently he was passing the gate of a merchant's house, before which the ground was swept and watered, and there the air was temperate. He sighted a broad bench beside the door. He sat, and he set his load thereon, to take a rest and smell the air. There came out upon him from the court door a pleasant breeze, and a delicious fragrance. He sat down on the edge of the bench, and at once heard from within the melodious sounds and lutes and other stringed instruments, and mixed exciting voices singing and reciting together with songs of birds warbling and glorifying the Almighty Allah in various tunes and tongues, turtles, mockingbirds, merels, nightingales, cushats, and stone curlews, whereat he marvelled in himself, and he was moved in mighty joy and solace. Then he went up to the gate and saw within a great flower, garden, where he were pages and black slaves, and such a train of servants and attendants, all going about, and so forth, and is found only with the kings and the sultans. And his nostrils were greeted with the savoury odours and of all manners of meats, and rich and delicate to touch and taste, and delicious and generous wines to purvey. So he raised his eyes towards heavenwards and said, Glory to thee, O Lord, O Creator and Provider, whom providest whomso thou will, without count or stint. O mine Holy One, I cry thee pardon for all sins, and turn to thee repenting of all offences. O Lord, there is no gainsaying thee in thine ordinance, and thy dominion, neither wilt thou be questioned of that thou dost, for thou indeed over all things art almighty. Extolled be thy perfection, whom thy will thou makest poor, and whom thou wilt makest rich, whom thou wilt exaltest, and whom thou wilt abasest, and there is no God but thou. How mighty is thy majesty, and how enduring is thy dominion, how excellent is thy government. Verily, thou favourest whom thou will of thy servants, whereby the owner of this place abideth in all joyance of life, and delighteth himself with pleasant scents, and delicious meats, and exquisite wines of all kinds. For indeed thou appointest unto thy creatures that which thou wilt, and that which thou hast foreordained unto them. Wherefore are some weary, and others are at rest, and some enjoy fair fortune and affluence, while others suffer the extreme of travail and misery, even as I do. And he fell to reciting this little poem. How many my labours that evermore endure, all goods of life enjoy, and in cooly shade recline. Each morn that dawns I wake in travail and in woe, and strange is my condition, and my burden gars me pine. Many others are in luck, and from miseries are free, and fortune never loads them with loads the like of mine. They live their happy days in all solace and delight, eat, drink, and dwell in honour, mid the noble and the dine. All living things were made of little drop of sperm. Thine origin is mine, and my providence is thine. Yet the difference and distance twixt the twain of us are far, as the difference of savour twixt vinegar and wine. But at thee, O God, all-wise, I venture not to rail, whose ordinance is just, and whose justice cannot fail. When Sinbad the porter had made an end of reciting his verses, he bore upon his burden, and was about to fare on, when there came forth to him from the gate a little foot-page, fair of face, and shapely of shape, and dainty of dress, who caught him by the hand, saying, Come in, and speak with my lord, with my master, for he calleth thee. The porter would have excused himself to the page, but the lad would take no refusal, so he left his load with the doorkeeper in the vestibule, and followed the boy into the house, which he found to be a goodly mansion, radiant and full of joy, majesty, till he brought him to the grand sitting-room, wherein he saw a company of notables and great men seated at the tables garnished with all manners of flowers and sweet-scented herbs, besides a great plenty of dainty viands and fruits, dried and fresh, and confectionaries, and wines, and choicest vintages. There also were instruments of music and mirth, and lovely slave girls playing and singing and smiling. All the company was ranged according to rank, and in the highest place sat a man of worshipful and noble aspect, whose beard, sides, hoariness, had stricken, and he was stately of stature and fair of favour, agreeable of aspect, and full of gravity and dignity and majesty. So Sinbad the porter was confounded at which he had beheld, and said to himself, By Allah, thus must either be a piece of paradise, or some king's palace. Then he saluted the company with his hand with much respect, praying for their prosperity, and kissing the ground before them, stood with his head bowed in humble attitude. Sinbad the porter, after kissing the ground between their hands, stood with his head bowed down in humble attitude. The master of the house bade him draw near, and be seated, and bespoke him kindly, bidding him welcome. Then he set before him various kinds of viands, rich and delicate and delicious, and the porter, after saying Bismillah, fell and ate his fill, after which he exclaimed, Praise be to Allah, whatso can be our case, and washing his hands returned thanks to the company for his entertainment. Quoth the host, Thou art welcome, and thy day is a blessed. But what is thy name and calling? Quoth the other, O my master, my name is Sinbad, the Hamal, and I carry folks' goods on my head for hire. The housemaster smiled and rejoiced, saying, Know, O porter, that thy name is even as mine, for I am Sinbad the sailor. And now, O porter, I would have thee let me hear the couplets thou recitest at the gate anon. The porter was abashed and replied, Allah upon thee excuse me, for toil and travail and lack of luck. When the hand is empty, teach a man ill manners and boorish ways. Said the host, Be not ashamed, thou art become my brother. But repeat to me the verses, for they please me, whence I heard thee recite them at the gate. Hereupon the porter repeated the couplets, and they delighted. The merchant said, whom said to him, Know, Hamal, O Hamal, that my story is a wonderful one, and thou shalt hear it. Hear that befell me, and all I underwent ere I arose of this state of prosperity, and became the master of this place wherein thou seest me. For I came not to this high estate save after travail sore, perilous galore. And how much more toil and trouble have I not suffered in days of yore? I have made 7 voyages, by each of which hangeth a marvellous tale, such as confoundeth the very reason. And all this came to pass by doom of fortune and fate. For from what destiny doth write there is neither refuge nor flight. Know then, good my merry men, continued he, that I am about to relate to thee the first voyage of Sinbad the sailor. My father was a merchant, one of the notables of my native place, a moneyed man of ample means, who died whilst I was yet a child, leaving me much wealth in money and lands and farmhouses. When I grew up, I laid house on the whole, and ate of the best, and drank freely, and wore rich clothes, and lived lavishly, companioning and consorting with youths of my own age and younger, and considering that this course of life would continue forever, and can no charge. Thus did I for a long time, but at last I woke from my heedlessness, and returning to my senses I found my wealth had become unwealth, and my condition ill-conditioned, and all I once had left my hand, and recovering my reason I was stricken with dismay and confusion, and bethought me of a saying of our Lord, of our Master, not our Lord, but our Prophet Solomon, son of David, in Islam, which I had heard aforetime from my fathers. which is, free things are better than other free. The day of the death is better than the day of the birth. A live dog is better than a dead lion, and the grave is better than a want. Then I got together my remains of estates and property, and sold of them all, even my clothes, for 3,000 dirhams, which with I resolved to travel to foreign parts, remembering the saying of the poet, which be this: by means of toil man shall scale the height. Who to fame aspires mustn't sleep o' night. Who seeketh pearl in the deep must dive, winning weal and wealth by his main and might. And who seeketh fame without toil and strife, thy impossible seeketh and wasteth life. So taking heart, I bought me goods, merchandise, and all needed for a voyage, and impatient to be at sea, I embarked with a company of merchants on board a ship bound for Bassorah. There we again embarked and sailed many days and nights, and we passed from the isle to isle and sea to sea and shore to shore, buying and selling and bartering everywhere. The ship touched and continued our course till we came to an island, as it were a garth of the gardens of paradise. Here the captain cast anchor, and, making fast to the shore, put out the landing plank. Walking down it pitter-patter, so all on board landed and made furnaces, and lighting fires therein, bruised themselves in various ways, some cooking and some other washing, whilst others were walked about the island for solace, and the crew fell to eating and drinking and playing and merrying and sporting, and I was one of the walkers. But as we were thus engaged, behold, the master, who was standing on the gunwale, cried out at the top of his voice, saying, "Ho, there, passengers! Run for your lives, and hasten back to the ship, and leave your gear, and save yourselves from destruction. Allah preserve you, for this island whereupon you stand is no true island, but a great fish stationary in the middlemost of the sea, whereupon the sand have settled, and trees have sprung up of old time, so that it is become like unto an island. But when ye lighted fires on it, it felt the heat and moved, and in a movement it will sink with you into the sea, and you will be drowned. So leave your gear, and seek safety ere you die." All who heard him from the lookout of the ship, all who heard him left their gear and goods and clothes, washed and unwashed, fire pots and brass cooking pots, and fled back to the ship for their lives. And some reached it, while others, amongst whom I did not, for suddenly the island shook and sank into the abyss of the deep, with all that were thereon, and the dashing sea surged over with clashing waves. I sank, the others down, sinking down into the deep, but Almighty Allah preserved me from drowning, and threw in my way a great wooden tub of those that had served the ship's company for tubbing. I gripped with my very nails and hands for the sweetness of life, and bestriding it like one riding, paddled with my feet the oars, like oars, whilst the waves tossed me as a sport right and left. Meanwhile the captain made sail and departed with those who had reached the ship, regardless of drowning and the drowned. And I ceased not following the vessel with my eyes till she was hid from my sight, and I made sure for death. Darkness closed in upon me while in this plight, and the winds and waves bore me on all night until the next day, till the tub brought to me under the lee of a lofty island, with trees overhanging the tide. I caught hold of a branch, and pulling my way on, I clambered onto the land after coming nigh unto death. But when I reached the shore, I found my legs cramped and numbed. My feet bore traces of the nibbling of fish upon their soles, wherewith I had felt nothing for excess of anguish and fatigue. I threw myself down on the island ground like a dead man, and drowned in desolation swooned away, nor did I return to my senses till the next morning, when the sun rose and revived me. But I found my feet swollen, so I made swift to move to my shuffling, by shuffling on my breech and crawling on my knees. For in that island were found store of fruits and springs of sweet water. I ate of the fruits which strengthened me, and thus I abode days and nights, till my life seemed to return, and my spirits began to revive, and I was better able to move about. So after due consideration, I fell to exploring the island, and diverting myself with gaze upon all things that Allah Almighty had created there, and rested under the trees, from one of the which I cut me a staff to lean upon. One day, as I walked among the march, I caught sight of some object in the distance, and thought it a wild beast, or one of the monster creatures of the sea. But as I drew near, looking hard the while, I saw that it was a noble mare, tethered on the beach. Presently I went up to her, and touching the horse, she cried out against me with a cry, so that I trembled for fear, and turned to go away. But then there came forth a man, under a tree, the earth, and followed me, crying out and saying, "Who and whence art thou? And what caused thee to come hither?" And I said unto him, I answered, "I am very sooth a stranger, and I was left to drown, and sundry others, by the ship we voyaged in, but Allah graciously sent me a wooden tub, so I saved myself thereon, and it floated with me till the waves cast me upon this island." When he heard this, he took my hand, and saying, "Come with me," he carried me into a great sadab of underground chamber, which was spacious as a saloon. He made me sit down at his upper end, and he brought me somewhat food, and being a hungered, I ate till I was satisfied and refreshed. And when he had put me at mine ease, and questioned me of myself, I told him all that had befallen me from first to last. And as he wondered at my adventure, I said, "By Allah, excuse me, I have told thee the truth of my case and the incident which betided me, and now I desire that thou tell me who thou art, and why thou abidest here under the earth, and why thou hast tethered yonder mare on the brink of the sea." Answered he, "Know that I am one of several who are stationed in different parts of this island, and we are of the grooms of the king Merijan, and under our hand are all his horses. Every month, about a new moon tide, we bring hither our best mares, which have never been covered, and picket them on the seashore, and hide ourselves at this place under the ground, so that none may espy us. Presently the stallions of the sea and the mares and come up out of the water, seeing no one, leap upon the mares, and do with them their will. When they have covered them, they try to drag them away with them, but cannot, by reason of the leg ropes. So they cry out at them, and butt and kick them, which we hearing know that the stallions have dismounted. So we run out and shout at them, shout, whereupon they are startled and return to the sea in fear. Then the mares conceive by them, and bear colts and fillies worth a mint of money, nor is their like to be found on the earth's face. This is the time of the coming forth of the sea stallions, and I will bear thee the king Midraj Jan, and show thee our country." Come, I know that thou hadst not happened on us, thou hadst perished miserably, and none had known of thee, but I will be the means of the saving of thy life, and thy return to thy own land. I called down blessings on him, and thanked him for his kindness and courtesy. And while we were yet talking, behold, the stallion came up out of the sea, and giving a great cry, sprang out the mare and covered her. When he had done his will of her, he dismounted and would have carried her away with him, but could not by means of reason of the tether. She kicked and cried out at him, whereupon the groom took a sword and target, and ran out of the underground saloon, smiting the buckler with the blade, and calling to his companion, who came out shouting and brandishing spears, and the stallion took fright at him, and plunging into the sea like a buffalo, disappeared under the waves. After this while we sat a while, till the rest of the grooms came up, each leading a mare, and seeing me with the fellow psych, questioned me of my case, and I repeated my story to them. Thereupon they drew near me, and spreading the table, ate and invited me to eat. So, eat, I ate with them. After a while they took my horse. They took horse, and, mounting me on one of the mares, set out with me, and fared on not without ceasing, till we came to the capital city of King Mirajan, and going to him, acquainted him with my story. Then he sent for me, and when they set me before him, and salams had been exchanged, he gave me a cordial welcome, and wishing me long life, bade me tell him my tale. So I related to him all that I had seen, and all that had befallen me from first to last, whereupon he marvels, and said to me, By Allah, O my son, thou hast indeed been miraculously preserved. Were not the term of thy life long one, thou hadst not escaped from these straits, but praise be to Allah for safety. Then he spoke cheerily to me, and treated me with kindness and consideration. Moreover, he made me as his agent for the port and registrar of all the ships who had entered into the harbour. I attended him regularly to receive his commandments, and he favoured me and did me all manners of kindness. Yes, and invested me with costly and splendid robes. Indeed, I was high in credit with him, as an intercessor for the folk, and an intermediary between them and him. When they wanted aught of him, I abode thus a great while, and as often as I passed through the city to the port, I questioned the merchants and travellers and sailors of the city of Baghdad. So haply I might hear of an occasion to return to my native land, but could not find none who knew it, or knew any who were sorted thither. At this I was chagrined, for I was weary of long strangerhood, and my disappointment endured for a time, till one day, going into King Mirajan, I found with him a company of Indians. I saluted them, and they returned my salams. Salam, and politely welcomed me, and I asked them of my country. When they asked me of my country, I questioned them of theirs, and they told me that they were of various castles, some being called Shakiria, who are the noblest of the castles, and neither oppress nor offer violence to any, and others Brahmans, a folk who abstain from wine, but live in delight and solace and merriment, and own camels and horses and cattle. Moreover, they told me that the people of India are divided into 72 castes, and I marveled at this with exceeding marvel. Amongst other things that I saw in King Mirijan's dominions was an island called Kasil, wherein all night is heard the beating of drums, and tabrets. But we were told by the neighboring islanders and travellers that the inhabitants of the people of diligence on judgment. In this sea I saw also a fish 200 cubits long, and the fishermen fear it, so they strike together pieces of wood and put it to flight. I also saw another fish, with a head like that of an owl, besides many other wondrous and rarities, which it would be tedious to recount. I occupied myself thus in visiting the islands till one day I stood in the port with a staff in my hand. According to my customs, behold, a great ship, wherein were many merchants came sailing for the harbour. When it reached the small inner port, where ships anchor under the city, the master furled his sails, and making fast to the shore, put on the landing planks, whereupon the crew fell to breaking bulk and landing cargo, as I stood there by, taking written note of them. They were long in bringing the goods to shore, so I asked the master, "Is there aught left in thy ship?" And he answered, "O my friend, there are divers bales of merchandise in the hold. Those owners, whose owners was drowned from amongst us at one of the islands and on our course. So his goods remained in our charge by way of trust, and we purpose to sell them and note their price, that we may convey it to his people in the city of Baghdad, the home of peace." "What was the merchant's name?" quoth I, and quoth he, "Sinbad the sailor." Whereupon I straightly considered him, and knowing him, I cried out to him with a cry, saying, "O captain, I am that Sinbad the sailor, who travelled with the other merchants, and when the fish heaved, and thou callest to us, some saved themselves, and others sank, I being one of them, but Allah Almighty threw in my way a great tub of wood, of those the crew had used to wash withal, and the winds and the waves carried me to this island, whereupon by Allah's grace, I fell in with the king, Merijan's grooms, and they brought me hither to the king, the master. When I told him my story, he entreated me with favour, and made me his harbour master, and I have prospered in his service, and found acceptance with him. These bales, therefore, are mine, the goods which God hath given me." The other exclaimed, "There is no majesty, and there is no might save in Allah, the glorious, the great. Verily, there is neither conscience nor good faith left among men." Said I, "O race, what mean these words, seeing that I have told thee my case?" And he answered, "Because thou heardest me say that I had with me goods whose owner was drowned, thou thinkest to take them without right. But this is forbidden by law to thee, for we saw him drown before our eyes, together with many other passengers, nor was one of them saved, so how canst thou pretend that thou art the owner of the goods?" "O captain," said I, "listen to my story, and give heed to my words, and my truth will be manifest to thee, for lying and leasing are the letter marks of the hypocrites." Then I recounted to him all that had befallen me since I sailed from Baghdad with him to the time when we came up to the Fish Island, where we were nearly drowned, and I reminded him of certain matters which had passed before us. Whereupon both of us, both he and the merchants, were certified of the truth of my story, and recognized me, and gave me joy and my deliverance, saying, "By Allah, we thought not that thou had escaped drowning, but the Lord hath granted thee new life." Then they delivered my bales to me, and I found my name written thereon, nor was aught thereof lacking. So I opened them, and making up a present for the king, Merijan, of the finest and costliest of the contents, caused the sailors carry it up to the palace, where I went in to the king and laid my present at his feet, acquainting him with what had happened, especially concerning the ship and my goods, whereat he wondered with exceeding wonder and truth of all that I had told him was made manifest to him. His affliction for me redoubled. After that, and he showered me with exceeding honour, and bestowed upon me a great present in return for mine. Then I sold my bales and what other matters I owned, making a great profit on them, and brought me other goods of great gear and of growth and of fashion of the island city. When the merchants were about to start on the homeward voyage, I embarked upon a ship and that I possessed, and going into the king, thanked him for all his favours and friendship, and craved his leave to return to my own land and friends. He farewelled me, and bestowed upon me great store of the country stuffs and produce, and I took leave of him and embarked. Then we set sail and fared on nights and days, by the permission of Allah Almighty, and fortune served us, and fate favoured us, so that we arrived in safety at Basra city, where I landed rejoiced at my safe return to my natal soil. After a short stay, I set out for Baghdad, the home of peace. Salam, with store of goods and commodities of great price. Reaching the city in due time, I went straight to my own quarter and entered my house. With my friends and kinsfolk came to greet me, all of us laughing and merry in merriment. Then I brought me eunuchs and concubines, servants and negro slaves, till I had a large establishment. And I bought me houses and lands and gardens, till I was richer and in better case than before. I returned to enjoy the society of my friends and familiars more assiduously than ever, forgetting all I had suffered of fatigue and hardships in strangerhood, and every peril of travel, and I applied myself to all manner of joys and solaces and delights, eating the daintiest viands, and drinking the deliciousest wines. And my wealth allowed this state of things to endure. Now, this, then, is the story of my first voyage, and tomorrow I will tell you the tale of the second of my 7 voyages. Saith he who telleth the tale. Then Sinbad the sailor made Sinbad the landsman sup with him, and bade him give 100 gold pieces, saying, Thou hast cheered us with thy company this day. The porter thanked him, and, taking the gift, went his way, pondering that which he had heard, and marvelling mightily at the things betided mankind. He passed the night in his own place, and with early morning repaired to the abode of Sinbad the sailor, who received him with honour, and seated him beside himself. As soon as the rest of the company was assembled, he set meat and drink before them, and when they were well eaten and drunken with merriment, he took up his discourse and recounted to them the words of the narrative. This has been the first story of the first voyage of Sinbad the Sailor, the first of 7 voyages. Look through the videos and find the other videos on the next voyage of Sinbad the Sailor, which is even more daring and enchanting and even more illustrious. I welcome all your comments and feedback, even negative comments, so I may learn yet more. Thank you, thank you, thank you. If any one of you listening has any personal encounters with spirits or with Sasquatch or with UFOs, please send me an email counting the descriptions of what happened to you, and I shall make a video upon them with your permission. Thank you very much. Send your stories that you have encountered in real life, in your personal lives, to this address to this email address that you will find in the description below. If you've had an experience of the fourth kind, send in an email about your encounter with Sasquatch or with spirits or with any strange story you have, and I shall recount it on this channel. Much love. God bless you. And God bless you all.